Very timely. Thank you for being here today, everyone. We will get started on this virtual candidate forum. Welcome. This is our annual forum not always annual, candidate forum that we host very often with the Legislative Action Coalition in Hopkins. Thank you for joining us on this busy and beautiful Saturday in the midst of campaign season. I know you all are out and about in the community and doing lots of work. So we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and to talk about education. So my name is Shannon Andreessen. I am a member of the Hopkins School Board and also a long-term member of the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition. And I am hosting this with my fellow board member, Brooke Roper, and one of our student board representatives on the school board, Mia Osman, will be asking some questions that have come in from the community. And we would then like to welcome our candidates for District 46B who have joined us here this evening. Hello to Cheryl Youakim and to Kim Rich. We would like to, at this point, give you each 2 minutes to introduce yourself and your campaign. First, we will go with Cheryl Youakim.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this today. Hopkins LAC is where I got one of my starts in politics, so it feels like coming home. I'm Cheryl Youakim, and I represent portions of Hopkins, all of Hopkins, two little precincts in St. Louis Park, and about a quarter of Edina, which joined our district 2 years ago. Some of you may have seen me subbing in our schools, either as a paraprofessional or a short call sub teacher in Hopkins, Edina, and St. Louis Park. I try to do that during the interim. Hopkins is where my husband and I bought a house over 27 years ago to raise our 3 kids, which house feels a little bit empty now that they're all graduated from Hopkins schools and launched their careers after college. Many of you have also heard my origin story, entering into politics, advocating for early childhood education, and then joining the Hopkins LAC to advocate for E through 12, the Hopkins Human Rights Commission, as well as the city council, and then being elected to the Minnesota House in 2014. I got involved in politics because I was passionate about an issue, E through 12 funding. I ran for city council to better connect people with the government that serves them. And I ran for House to bring that experience up to the state capitol at that level for our communities. I'm socially liberal, approach fiscal issues with a thoughtful and practical eye, and I know how to work across the aisle to get things done. Despite our polarized climate, I believe that we share so much in common. I've heard that from many folks through emails, phone calls, attendance at the community conversations I host during session, town halls that we host before and after, talking with folks at their doors. And I want to thank you all for your shared concerns, hopes, and dreams for your families, businesses, and community. And I look forward to our conversation today and to earning your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we do have a timer running. If you can see, it is on the tile for Rachel Hartland right above her head, so that you know how much time you have left. And now I would like to turn it over to Kim Rich for your 2-minute intro. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Kim Rich. I'm a retired entrepreneur and business owner. I've held real estate and insurance licenses here in Minnesota, and I've lived in Edina since 1999. We moved here from Plymouth and wanted to be close to Southdale, where my wife and I both worked, and we met there and settled here. So my platform is public safety. I want to make sure that the police have all the resources they need to do their jobs. And education, we want to make sure that the budgeted money is actually making its way into the classroom, and accountability for all the taxing and spending. And I've realized that representation is listening. And I listened when I knocked on doors, and I heard the mother of a ninth grader explain that there were 47 students in her Hopkins ninth grade class. And there, 3 doors down from her was a teacher who just got laid off. And a grandmother of another ninth grader who doesn't have a teacher in the class at all. They're just writing the assignment on the board and expecting the students to figure it out. So these kinds of instances don't seem to agree with me. I'm not going to, I would never agree with that it has to be changed. And I grew up with modular scheduling. Nobody probably knows about that, but in the 70s, that was an experiment that was done. And I think they're experimenting today with children. So thank you.
That's our lovely Oscar music playing you off. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Now I'd just like to take a little bit of time to introduce the LAC Hopkins School District and also give some framing about the candidate forum itself. So this is the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition, or candidate forum. We do it regularly and really enjoy the relationships that it builds. You can see that we are very student focused, and so these are some of our students that are prior members of the LAC with our current Lieutenant Governor. So what we do as an LAC, first and foremost, we are a nonpartisan advocacy group centered around education and what we need to do for public education in the Hopkins School District. We're comprised of school board members, parents, students, and community members. We advocate for education funding and policies at both the state and the federal level. And to do this, we work closely with district leadership to identify the pressing educational issues each year that are affecting our district in particular. We then create a legislative platform that is approved by the school board to represent our priorities, and we take that to all of our legislators who represent the district. We are recognized as a valuable resource for legislators, policymakers, and advocacy groups for research, community connections, and timely advocacy. We do this also through partnership with AMSD, which is the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, and MSBA, which is the Minnesota School Board Association. We partner also with neighboring school districts, and we host community events on education finance, special education, and school safety. We also organize an annual day of advocacy at the Capitol, which includes individual meetings with our 9 legislators. This is a map of Hopkins Public Schools, so you will see why you were invited here today and why we have quite a few sessions. We have 9 legislators across our district, and we serve different municipalities that touch on our district. So here we'll see the schedule. We have completed 4 of our sessions. We are in the 2 p.m. House District 46B, and we have 1 more that will wrap up today's candidate forum. Some guidelines that we go through that are important to know. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not of the LAC or Hopkins Public Schools. The purpose of this forum is to offer an opportunity for voters to hear the candidates discuss important education issues that will affect students and families in our school district and across the state. The Public Schools Legislative Action Coalition, again, is a nonpartisan advocacy group. We have guidelines for the questions that are submitted. Everyone in the community had an opportunity to submit questions in advance. If any questions are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature, they will not be used. Questions that are similar may be combined and summarized by the moderator. And questions can also be submitted right now via chat during our YouTube live event. The moderator will treat them as stated above, though only questions related to education will be entertained for the purposes of this forum. So our format is each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, which you've already done, thank you, and 1 minute for a concluding statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question presented by the moderator, and a timekeeper will present a running timer to keep track of the 2-minute countdown. So keep your eye on that. Of course, you will get the beautiful music at the end. And we would like to remind candidates that this is not a debate. Please do not address one another. And the LAC reserves the right to utilize the mute feature if a candidate exceeds the time or does not abide by this format. So with all of that out of the way, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Brooke Roper, to ask the questions that were provided to the candidates in advance of this forum.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you both for being here today. Looking forward to listening to you both. So question number 1 is, in recent years, numerous proposals have been made in the legislature to provide public funding for private and religious schools, either directly through vouchers or indirectly through tax credits, tax shelter accounts, or by routing tuition through tax-exempt organizations. What is your position on providing public funding for non-public schools? Please explain your reasoning. And either candidate can go.
Cheryl, why don't you take this one first?
Right. Are we just going to alternate then, or?
Yes.
Got it. So I am opposed to private school vouchers and for tax credits and running them through outside entities for many different reasons. But one is that we haven't kept up pace with inflation for our public schools. And right in our state constitution, it's one of the 2 things we're required to fund as a public form of education. And until we have them kept up with inflation and more stabilized, I don't want to entertain that concept. And then also we have open enrollment and charter schools. So we have a lot of parent choice that is already out there. And we also currently have a K through 12 tax credit that we just increased the income level for and the amount that can be spent.
Thank you, Kim.
Vouchers absolutely are not supported by Democrats. They currently have a stranglehold on the public schools, and the Democrats seem to want to do anything they can to avoid any competition, even at the expense of students and parents. This is why there's an exodus from the public schools in every city in our district. Competition is important. It makes us strive to be our best. Under Governor Walz, the literacy rates have fallen by 16%. In the past 4 years of full Democratic control, the state has taken away decision-making power from local educators, school boards, and cut parents out. After passing the largest education budget in history, we have overcrowded classrooms, fewer teachers, and our students suffer the consequences. Democrats included in their record-setting education budget more than 65 new mandates on schools. Many of them were unfunded and unnecessary, forcing districts to cut their budgets in order to comply at the expense of the students. Democrats fail to understand the real reason for the mass exodus from public schools. They'll argue the reason for parents to leave a school is for religious reasons. And to some degree it is. However, the lion's share of parents leaving public schools would actually stay if they were not shut out, if their children were not being indoctrinated. If citizens hope to get better public schools, they must consider how they vote this year. Will voters expect a different result from the Democrat incumbents? It's not too late to look at a better future by electing new leadership. I am in favor of vouchers.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with funding.
Okay, so if elected, your oath to uphold the Minnesota State Constitution includes the Education Clause, which reads in part, the legislator shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. As you're aware, increases in the state funding formula are not keeping up with inflation and expenses. Consumer price index increases over the last 2 years have ranged from 2.5% to 9.1%. The increase in the formula in 2023 still resulted in deficit spending in some districts, even with reductions to curb expenses, due in part to many new mandates that came with funding increase. Do you support an increase in the per pupil formula and removal of the current cap of 3% on the inflation factor for the per pupil formula? Do you have any additional solutions to secure sound funding for Minnesota public schools?
Will be you, Mr. Rich, going first on this one.
Okay, thank you. Nothing can keep up with high inflation. Every member of the Democrat trifecta have taken this oath and failed. They've had full control during one of the most prosperous times in Minnesota history, full control during a time of less than 2% inflation, which was lower than the Federal Reserve goal of 2%. It's funny how Democrats blame their deficit spending on inflation. Democrat spending would have been a deficit spending without inflation. Let's say we triple the formula to 9.1%, and inflation drops as suddenly as it increased. Would that be tax gouging? The trifecta eclipsed everyone's expectation of Democrat spending. They had nearly $18 billion in surplus to spend, which they did. They raised taxes and they based the next budget as though another surplus was on the way. And the kids, what happens to the kids when leaders spend every dime they have and leave the classrooms out? Because parents see their kids indoctrinated with these racist policies. The MDE is actually trying to incorporate these policies into math and science. This is not education. This is not learning to read and do math and do science. It simply doesn't matter how much money we throw at it. We could get a lot more bang for the buck by getting back to the basics, even cutting budgets and making them leaner and more efficient. I don't really fall in line with the current policies of the MDE. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Youakim, your response to the question on funding?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about education funding in 2 minutes since the formula is complicated, but we did have a $17 billion surplus. 12 billion of it was one-time money, and one-time money in schools does not fare well. And I think a lot of us know that. You don't want to hire teachers with one-time money. I'm proud that we led the charge in trying to fill the gaps of 20 years of underfunding, even though we got to spend 2.2 billion above the base, which, by the way, school districts, we spend 38% of our state general fund on our education system, and that's how seriously we take it. But we got to spend 2.2 billion above the base, but we've only filled about a third of the hole. I was very proud to fight for indexing the formula to inflation, because you all know in the last 20 years, there were 4 years of 0% increases. That compounding interest is hard to climb out of. We picked a 2% base because we were looking at the when you do the 2% the first year, it goes in 2%, it rolls into the base, and then 2% on top of that. So for the biennium, it would be a 6% increase. The 3% cap was because it's fiscally prudent. Inflation over the last 40 years has only gone over 3%, 4 or 5 times. So if inflation sticks where it is right now at 2.5%, you'll get 2.5% when we set the next state budget in the next year. And that doesn't preclude you from coming back and explaining, hey, we still haven't filled the hole. We still need more to do. And that's what leads me to answering the second part of the question is conversations with our school districts to see what their needs are, making sure we're understanding that schools are different across the entire state. And you can see that with the READ Act when we came back and moved money forward and then put more money into training to make sure that our schools could utilize that and get everybody ready to raise those literacy scores.
Thank you, Representative Youakim. Now our third and final question that was submitted to the candidates beforehand is about MDE.
So, how does your vision for public education in Minnesota align with the priorities of the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE?
That's a good question. I had to look back and look at the Due North plan because it hopefully will be updated this year. We passed so much of it last year, from updating the social studies standards to increasing funding for our mental health support staff, for increasing funding for teacher recruitment retention, as well as money into youth prize for those after school activities, $10 million in the base. So base funding for full service community schools, which we haven't had before, universal meals, and the list goes on and on what we tried to do. But like I said, we know that 20 years of underfunding can't be turned around overnight. We still have about a third of a hole to fill, and waiting to see what the updated plan looks like. But I know, speaking with MDE and speaking with districts across the state, one of the things we're going to start even focusing more on is the absenteeism. This last session, with some of our one-time money, we started 12 absenteeism pilot projects across the state, plus a task force to look at it. And we can't wait to get some of those from the pilot program, to get some of their ideas back and what they're trying to do, to see what works and see how we can implement something statewide or provide some funds for districts. Also, we have a lot of districts with declining enrollment, and we have a provision in the categoricals to ease that declining enrollment. But people just aren't having as many babies anymore. So that's something we'll have to look at as well. And then, of course, continuing that investment in the READ Act. It already is showing that it's working in some of our districts that have done it early on. There's a Monroe Elementary in Brooklyn Park, for instance. They got their teachers trained and started at the ground running 2 years ago. They saw their literacy rates go from 45% to 90% in 2 years. So we're going to keep an eye on that and keep talking to our districts to see what they need to implement that, and then move on to numeracy and a few other areas.
Thank you. Your turn, Mr. Rich.
Thank you. I'm quite skeptical of the MDE, with the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud, which they oversee. The Democrats will blame the bad actors on the whole scandal, but the truth was they kept on funding these bad actors well after they knew there was something wrong in that system. And when there's hundreds of millions of dollars going away like that, and I keep hearing about holes to fill, where's all this money going? I don't know why any citizens aren't asking that question. One of the controversies regarding our governor is his number of trips to China. Democrats insist his visits are innocent, as though he was a tourist, which isn't really the case. We learned in the debate that he was claiming to be.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rich. We are asking about your positions on educational issues.
Okay.
In particular, how you align with MDE.
Yeah, all right.
Stay on topic.
I will align as well as I can. If I were to be elected, I will be certainly open to all people that would come to me for help. And I know that the school districts need a lot of help, and the Minnesota Department of Education has a lot of control over the purse strings. So I come from a business background. It's a whole different perspective than my opponent. And I couldn't run my business the way the state is running their business. And so there's, I would say, a lot of holes to fill and or stop these holes from being there, and we need to be accountable. So if voters want to explore that idea, they can look to themselves to see if they're happy. If they're happy, they vote for Cheryl. If they're not
Thank
happy,
you.
yeah,
I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Now we're going to take this opportunity to welcome one of our student board reps, Mia Osman, to ask community questions that have come in.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mia Osman. I'm a senior at Hopkins High School. I serve on the student board. I hope to major in political science and become a politician, so I'm really happy to have this opportunity. My first question is, schools have changed how they deliver education, but not how they assess students. What are your thoughts on changing how to measure student success?
I didn't hear that.
And we'll have Mr. Rich, you can go first on this one. Thank
Can
you.
can you repeat the question?
Mia, are you able to repeat the question, or would you like me to do that?
I can repeat it. Schools have changed how they deliver education, but not how they assess students. What are your thoughts on changing how to measure student success? Did you guys hear that one?
I heard that, yes. So what you're talking about is not using a grade format where you're not going to grade the students on their tests. They're just achieving a certain level or whatever. I don't know how you're doing that, but you know, I don't know that a lot of colleges are looking at those types of assessments, so that you know, it's going to inhibit your ability to find a good college if you try to change those things. And so at this point in time, if you're just looking to do an experiment, I would say no to that. But if you actually know that this is a valid way to measure a student's ability, we can talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Youakim.
Thank you. First, I want to compliment Hopkins Schools on your creative use of online schooling and your hybrid model. I think it's really a great idea to have the kids come in a few days a week if they're hybrid, to have that socialization and the ability to touch base and have some of those wraparound services. So I think that's what you kind of mean by we've gotten creative about changing the way we deliver. I was kind of hoping we could take a breath and do even better after COVID. I think we missed the boat a tiny bit on figuring out a different way of delivering the education system because it's not working for everybody. As for measuring student success, we have a lot of requirements that come to us for the federal money, and the state picks one test that the federal government looks at through ESSA, and that we've decided is our Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. We also, though, are an opt-out state where parents can opt out of taking that assessment. And sometimes that can kind of really skew the grades in certain schools. But it's still an important test for us to see. And it's a way to hold our schools accountable for teaching to the standards and the graduation requirements we set. But we did just get rid of the above and below level grade level questions with that. So it would tighten it up, because really the assessments come in the classroom. They come with the teachers' formative and summative assessments as kids are going through, oops, got a little dark there. As kids are going through the class, but then also the ability to do map testing frequently during the year, so teachers can see where the students' holes are and what they need to address when they're in class. So there's a variety of ways, and a lot of that's left up to local control.
Thank
Okay.
you. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, I'm gonna give it to another student. Her name is Evelyn. She's a freshman and she also goes to the Hopkins High School. So take it away.
Many public schools are unsafe for children who, many Hopkins public schools are unsafe for children to walk or bike to. We know that walking to school has tremendous mental and physical health benefits for students. What will you do to expand the safe routes to school available for students?
And Representative Youakim, if you want to take this one first.
Yes, I think Safe Routes to School is a wonderful program. It's funded through our transportation budget, and I see it in action when our kids went to school here. We were about 4 blocks away from Alice Smith Elementary and 2 streets away from a busier street where I think Hopkins used some of their Safe Routes to School money to put flags on either, like flags in one bucket that the kid could take across so people could see them in our school safety program. We just added on a requirement. I know it's a requirement again to the schools, but you train for bus safety. We're asking you to also train for bike safety, and we put extra money into that Safe Routes to Schools for districts to be able to do that. I think promoting activeness early on with our kids and having the ability to find different ways for kids to get to school is a great idea, and I think it's really flexible and helpful for parents too.
Thank you. Mr. Rich?
Thank you. The SROs, I think they were there in all of our districts at one point, but they were discontinued at some point, and now they're talking about bringing them back. So the increase of
Evelyn, do you want to repeat the question? This is about safe routes to schools.
okay. Well, I think
Can
they've
you go
increased.
ahead and repeat the question for Mr. Rich?
The question is, many Hopkins public schools are unsafe for children to walk or bike to. We know that walking to school has tremendous mental and physical health benefits for students. What will you do to expand the safe routes to school available for students?
Well, we want to increase the continuity of sidewalks in Hopkins, work with access so that students have safe place to walk. We used to have school patrols when I was a kid, so that the kids would cross the street and they were well marked and adorned with a lot of reflective material so that they were safely seen by all the drivers in the neighborhood. Obviously, they need to be coached about walking around school buses where they are, the visibility's low and bus drivers have a hard time seeing people. So, being safe is on the students as well. They need to be able to be aware of their surroundings at all times so that they're keeping themselves out of harm's way. So I think that there's a way to make sure that we get a safe route to schools. And that's definitely something we'd look at. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Next question, Mia.
Okay, thank you both for answering, and thank you, Evelyn, for asking that question. The next question is, Minnesota is one of 8 states that provides free school meals for students. In all of these states, the program is more popular than expected and more families are participating. When we add inflationary costs for food and deliveries, all 8 states are over budget. How can Minnesota increase and stabilize future funding to feed students?
And Mr. Rich, if you want to take that one first.
Well, I think that the last measure that was adopted is feeding students that really don't have any need for funding to be fed. They're feeding all the students in the state, which quite a few of them are not really in any peril of hunger. And so this seems to be a waste of dollars going to people. My parents, we had a lunch ticket And my father had to pay for a lunch ticket every week for me, or else I could brown bag it. And so, this focus on the need to be fed all the time is, I mean, not that we don't want to feed our kids, we do. Everybody needs to be fed, and there are some people that need help with that, and there should be plenty of funding for that, and we can look at that, but just the students that need it rather than everyone included. It's foolish to spend money like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Youakim.
Yes, I'm proud to say that I think we're actually number 14 now on universal meals. And one of the issues and one of the conscious decisions we made was that when you draw a line, there's always winners and losers. And there's some kids that could really use that money or use that lunch because their parents were just above the line and couldn't make it. And one of the reasons why we didn't look at just lifting the line a little bit further was the fact that we don't look at a kid when they come to school and say, okay, what do your parents make? We want to decide that before we give you a textbook or before we give you a desk to sit at, because that's essential for learning, and so is food. It's really hard for a kiddo to be hungry and learn how to do math. It also made it a little bit easier for school districts. We're still trying to figure out and fine tune the forms. We did realize during COVID that direct certification was a lot easier than expected. So that has come into play, but we still have under about 20% where we're still trying to figure out how to make sure we're maximizing the federal dollars. And that's important. We wrote this bill to maximize the federal dollars coming in. So we also have to make sure our federal government continues to fund the program. There has been talk about discontinuing that by some members of Congress. And then as well as when we wrote it, we included it into base funding and into our forecast model. And it's a reimbursement system. And our nutritionists are amazing at figuring out how much food they need. And there's very little waste. And they get the sharing tables. So the amount coming to the schools increases as the reimbursement adds because we have it in the forecast model. So you true up the forecast at the end of the second year in your budget bill, so that money will always be there unless somebody comes in and decides the program's not worth it and they take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you to both candidates for addressing those questions that were submitted by the public. We now have time for your closing statements. You each have 1 minute. I cannot remember who went first on the opening statement. Was it okay. So Mr. Rich, you are welcome to go first on the closing statement. You get 1 minute.
Thank you. The Democrats will tell you they have made great strides and improvements and that they still have more to do. And but the statistics will speak for themselves. Scores are down and parents are pulling their kids out of the public schools. There's a famous Democrat who's made this point that the national reviewers selected by Governor Tim Walz's own agency were severely critical of the draft K through 12 social studies standards recently approved by the administrative law judge. And this department is, they're experts on, and they're highly critical of Minnesota's social studies standards. So I believe there's a different approach to our education. And rather than going with experiment, we go with a new approach, with a business approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Youakim, your closing statement.
So it's really been an honor to serve Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Edina in the legislature, and I hope to earn your vote on or before November 5th so that we continue the good work that we started together. I'm hearing from folks all over. Education is one of the top priorities and always has been for this Senate district. And the emails and the conversations I've had at the door has not changed, with that being one of the top number one. But folks also want an economy that works for everyone. Of course, quality education for our youngest learners to those preparing for a career in college, access to affordable childcare, money in long-term care to protect women's reproductive choice, investments and reform in community public safety to feel protected and supported, sensible gun control, dependable transportation system, affordable housing, and the list goes on, and to protect our environment as well as your rights. I will always stand for your rights to love who you love, worship how you choose, and to equal protection under the law. I'm socially liberal, fiscally practical, and get things done. And despite what seems like a polarized environment, I think we can all work across the aisle on one common goal, and that's taking care of our kids.
Thank you. I really appreciate both of you taking the time to be here, and for your interest in education issues. The LAC members, along with your constituents, enjoy learning more about your priorities for education funding and policies that will affect the future of Minnesota students. We appreciate your candidacy and wish you the best of luck in the November elections. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.